Hey guys, welcome back. Today we've got another Q&A, so let's go ahead and jump right into it. So Jay Phonebrew, I think that's how you say that, says, is there a video in accounting for riser height and surround speaker placement? Designing, over 100 theaters a year, probably half of those have 2 or more rows, and the other half, of course, single rows. But anytime we have 2 rows, you're gonna have to have a riser for the back row. So the back row can have clearance over the front seated people's heads. Gotta see over their heads to be able to have a clear line of sight to the screen. And also we don't want the center channel to be blocked. Usually, or hopefully, we have a center channel behind the screen, behind an acoustic screen, but it's not always possible, so it's a little more of a pain whenever we have to work with a center channel under a screen. Not ideal, but it does happen. But anytime we have that, where we have the rear row is higher, we have what's called a tilted bed layer. And what that means is the bed layer is no longer on a 0-180 plane. It has to be raised. The rears have to go up, sometimes as much as 15 degrees up. So they might be at 165 instead of down at 180, or even with one row, they're gonna be raised a little bit, but they're gonna be raised a little bit more. And we have to account for that in our Atmos placement as well, because now we've tilted the bed layer up. So if we keep our top rear where they were with one row and we push the rears up, now all of a sudden we have less separation. We don't hear that well behind us like we do like in the front hemisphere of our head. That separation is extremely important. So we're gonna have to push our top rears for our Atmos forward a little bit. Now, of course, the commenter specifically asked about surround placement. So let's talk about that real quick. Whenever we're watching something, we have the main listening position. Usually that's gonna be the front row, just because when we move to the back row, the mains have to be even wider apart because, to have the proper angle. So usually the front row is gonna be the sweet spot or the main listening position. If we want proper object placement to both rows, there's some things we need to consider. So first of all, we have to make sure that the surrounds are not blocked for the main listening position, as we've already gone over in past Q&As. Those are going to usually be a little bit forward because our brain cannot hear if something's at 110 or it's at 80, because the other ears on this side, it's over here, it's going to sound the same, but we have to make sure it is not blocked. So that's the most important thing, that our surround is not blocked. So if we've got our surrounds right here, the front row or the main listening position row, they can all hear that surround perfectly. Now, when there's an object panning, and that object should be right here to the side of them, over in this area. For the back row back there, it's gonna sound like basically where a wide would be. It's gonna be well forward of them. They're not really gonna have any objects properly placed. And whenever something goes from the surround to the rear, it's just gonna jump from here to like over there. Their object placement is not gonna sound good. Now, you do have some high-end processors that do discrete channel mapping, where they'll have a surround for each row. The problem with that is anytime something should be right here, say at 90 degrees, right beside them, the row that's going to hear that properly is the main listening position, because the object is traveling from speaker to speaker because it makes them discrete, and the back row is still not going to properly hear the objects, because when that object should be right beside them, they're still hearing the surround up here because it hasn't got to their surround yet. So what I do is, that's a raise. It is really fantastic. So what it does is you have 2 surrounds and they're on the same channel. And you're gonna hear some people, freak out about comb filtering. Yes, there is comb filtering, but guess what? Anytime your mains play and you hear imaging, they're both playing the same frequencies at the same time. You get that nice large sound stage. Guess what? Comb filtering. So, you can freak out about it if you want, but the bottom line is, you're going to outperform a lot of theaters that way by using things like arrays. Now, some people will put surrounds between the rows. This just screws it up for both rows, because for the front row, that surround is blocked by seat backs, by seated heads usually, and you have little separation between that speaker and the rears. Because we don't hear that good behind us, we need separation. So it causes that problem, and then it also causes a huge gap, because if, say, you put those at 110, say your mains are at 30, which is the max you really want to spread them, that's 80, is that 80? 80 degrees. That's 80 degrees between them. You're gonna have an audible gap as objects pan from that main to that surround that's way behind you. So it's just not a good idea to do that. I don't do that in my home theaters that I design. So let's look at a few clients that have used the arrays. Now keep in mind, these guys using arrays are using processors that, they're sharing the same surround channel, okay? And If we use the right speakers, we can simply like wire them in parallel. We don't even have to have separate amps for each one. And by doing that, we drop our ohm load in half. So we have to be able to handle the ohm load, but we also get usually about 3 dB more sensitivity on the channel. All right, so this is one of my more recent designs, and the guy finished it probably about 6 months ago. And this is another guy that I know that went to go demo the room and listen to it. So here, and this guy's heard many rooms. He's been to CEDIA. He's heard a lot of high-end rooms done by, you know, very well-known designers. Now, I'm gonna leave a name out of this for obvious reasons. Best sounding room I've ever experienced, better than Blink's Trinnov-driven room, better than every one I visited. The only thing I would do is I like a little more grunt in my bass, but that's a preference thing. And this room had enough bass to run you out of the room. It's just the way the guy had it dialed in. You know, not everyone likes as much bass as, you know, someone else. It's kind of is a personal preference. But let's look at another one. Okay, raw test with an old uncalibrated Marantz amp and CD player. The triads are hands down better than the Focal calibrated and being pushed by the ATI amps and Trinnov processor. And we have not even put up the front wall yet. Damn and thank you. Now this client here is comparing it, of course, to a demo room. I think it's like a boutique shop or something like that. But this one was also set up by a Trinnov rep. So I mean, the Trinnov, the speakers were all set up properly, but you cannot overcome speaker layout, the room plan, the room design, the acoustic plan, and you know, you cannot overcome that. Trinnov is just a processor. I mean, it's not magic, even though a lot of people push it as magic. It's, you know, it's gonna lose hands down every time to a better laid out room. So that is my take on how I handle multiple rows. Tilted bed layer, we've got to make corrections in the Atmos channel to maintain separation, and we want both rows, or if we want both rows to have more properly placed objects whenever things are panning around the room, we're going to be doing arrays. And also the same thing with Atmos. You know, if there's something that's supposed to be about 130 degrees, you know, say like 40 degrees past us, that's where the object's supposed to be. You know, if the main listening position is in the front, and you know, the top rears, if you know, if you go, say you place them at 120, 125 or whatever, you know, in tolerance, but we've had to push them forward a little bit because we have a tilted bed layer, they're going to be in front of the back row. So they're not going to hear that object that should be behind them, you know, overhead. Behind them, they're going to hear it in front of them. Even if you go to a 0.6, they're still going to be in front of them. And all you've done with the 0.6 is now you've pushed the top front and top rear apart, further smear them to the already raised rears. So that hasn't, you know, you've done nothing. You haven't accomplished anything. The objects are still not properly placed. So in that case, I also do arrays. I will do a top rear array. So the front row has a set of rears and so does the back row. So at least now we both have, when objects are supposed to be placed behind us in the Atmos channel, we're both rows are getting that sense of object placement that's more properly placed. Now, to pull that off, you do need Atmos speakers that you can aim. I like using the Triad Rotosats because we can dial them in perfectly on our 45-degree, you know, angle, where we can just spin the enclosure, or the inside spins independently from the outside. We can aim those at the seats you want them to, or wherever we want them in the room. I have aiming arrows on my plans to kind of show you where to aim them. But then they've also got that laser aim tweeter where you can really dial them in, and that helps keep one set from not oversteering the other set for the row that's not intended for. It works exceptionally well. You don't need a fancy processor to do any of this. You can use an AVR. So that is how I handle multiple rows. All right, guys, if y'all need any help with room designs, my contact information is in the description of the video. Reach out to me. If you have any more questions for future, Q&As, just drop them down in the comments. All right, guys, I'll see y'all for the next one.